makes, and it is shaped by the values we stand by. So this book really brings together all my learnings, experiences, and also my opinions. And it is meant for anyone who's trying to build something meaningful. Whether you're in a corporate role, whether you're building a startup, whether you're figuring out your next move. And I have tried to take an approach where I've included not just stories from my own journey, but also from leaders across industries. Because I firmly believe that leadership is not sector specific, particularly at senior levels. What matters today is the breadth of perspective, the ability to see patterns, the ability to connect the dots and recombine ideas to come up with new solutions. If you look at the book, and Ajay, I know, and thank you for spending the time reading it. If you've read the book, you will see that the themes are very modern and contemporary. What today's workforce cares about, it's about resilience, it's about purpose, it's about working across generations. What does it mean to read in an era of AI? What about mental health? But I've also included the classic leadership chapters, for example, strategy, execution, communication, and it's also very practical. The book doesn't tell you what to do, but it ends with a do-it-yourself leadership toolkit, which you can use to create your own customized 90-day action plan. So what I'm really hoping, Ajay, is that this book will give readers the confidence to stop copying somebody else's playbook and give people the confidence that they can write their own playbook. So as you rightly said in your question, there are no acronyms, there are no frameworks or slogan. It's plain and simple, just leadership for tomorrow. And I have tried to, most leadership books are written by academics or by consultants, and those understandably follow a framework-based approach. Books written by business leaders and practitioners typically tend to be memoirs, or they tend to be the story of how they built a single organization. I've tried to take a slightly different approach. So these are not my memoirs. My anecdotes are just to illustrate an argument or a point, but it's more to help readers to step back and reflect on the full range of leadership issues that actually come at them all at once. So that was really the thinking of what went and of what was behind the book and what went into the book.
Thank you so much. And I think, that's pretty much a hallmark of your book, which is very practical, which is very grounded, and there are a lot of examples, the anecdotes, so that, it's just not about, top 1, 2, 3, 4 points, but those points are pretty much elaborated with a lot of anecdotes and the stories and the examples, the cases which people can relate to. I would come to one of the aspects which you just also mentioned, that, various aspects of leadership, and the previous speakers also deliberated a lot on that, which is the purpose. And your book, in the initial chapters, you talk about pretty much a purpose-driven leadership. And, this is a word many of us also struggle to understand, that is it something concrete? What is the purpose is all about? Or this is, a pretty much an abstract idea, especially in a corporate world, which is driven by very much the tangible milestone, tangible timeline and everything. So if you please elaborate on that fact, and most importantly, as a leader at the top position, how they can instill a sense of purpose among the various categories of employee. Most importantly about the Gen Zs, and in fact, the previous speakers were also talking about that. Today's Gen Zs, do they really care about purpose? Is there something that can really drive them towards an unified purpose?
Right. So there's a lot to unpack there. Fantastic question. So you're right, Ajay. Purpose is a word we hear a lot, but it feels very abstract. It almost feels like a riddle. And because it feels abstract, people often dismiss it as fluff, or it's something nice to talk about, or something you see nicely put on a company website, maybe mentioned here and there. But the reality is that when people find purpose in their work, everything starts to feel more meaningful. Work starts to become a source of pride. and it starts to give you energy. And in today's world, I think if you can find the purpose in your work, it is the biggest antidote to FOMO, fear of missing out. It's an antidote to burnout, feeling like you're on a treadmill all the time, feeling overwhelmed by, oh my goodness, there's an endless flurry of meetings and emails. And I think a sense of purpose is a good, counter to all of that. But it's abstract. So how have I approached it? What I've tried to do is I've tried to make it concrete by thinking of four possible ways that you can make people, discover their purpose in a more structured manner. The first, of course, is through an organization's mission. Try and understand, what is the mission? What is the purpose? Does it energize you? I'll give you a small anecdote about myself. And, I was really enjoying my work. I enjoyed evaluating companies in CRISIL. I evaluated businesses and all of that. And I thought of my role as doing that. But as I began to hear more conversations about my organization's purpose, they were conversations about bringing transparency to markets, conversations about enabling flow of capital, conversations about raising standards across industries, improving transparency. All of a sudden, my work became elevated to a completely different level, and it actually made me feel 2 feet taller. So I think that's just a small example. Spend the time understanding. Also watch out for, is the company really living its purpose and mission? Because I think that's really important. But when people find that alignment, there's a magic that happens. And it also becomes a compass for decisions. I also want to make it clear that this doesn't happen overnight. Purpose discovery is a journey. It can change over time as you evolve, and so on. The second way of finding purpose is really to look at role models, which we all know. There are so many people driven by purpose. What can we learn from them? The third thing I've also called out is finding purpose in the day-to-day work. Purpose is not some big, grand, lofty thing that arrives neatly packaged one day. It's in how you do your work on a day-to-day basis. Are you doing your work in a manner that promotes inclusive hiring? Are you creating opportunities for small businesses? Are you mentoring others and helping them come up? Because I believe in today's world, we are working with a generation which is not about just telling them where they went wrong, but trying to figure out what is the best way to communicate with them, give them constructive feedback in a holistic manner, right? So I think there are so many things that can go in living your purpose on a day-to-day basis. And finally, what I pointed out also is the whole concept of privilege. Everyone sitting in this audience today is privileged in some way or the other. It could be your education, it could be your networks, it could be your financial or economic or social status. The question really is, can we use our privilege as a platform to create opportunities for others? And that is what will give a sense of purpose. Now, quickly moving on to Gen Z. At the outset, I want to say, people of our generation, we have a lot of myths and we have a lot of preconceived notions about Gen Z. We say, oh, they are not committed, oh, they don't have purpose, oh, they keep moving jobs. I disagree. I think they view purpose in different ways. They look for authenticity in purpose. It's not enough just to say this is our purpose. You have to live it. Leaders and CEOs have to demonstrate that purpose in their day-to-day actions, the way they deal with people. There's no point saying empathy is my corporate value when I'm not showing that empathy in my day-to-day interactions. And look at the world that Gen Z has been born into. They don't know if the company they're working for will be around tomorrow because it could be disrupted by AI. They don't know whether their jobs will be around tomorrow. They have been born after the global financial crisis, after which the trust in institutions is at an all-time low. How we really, they've grown up in a very different context. And I think leaders today who are millennials, and we still have Gen Y and even some older people in the leadership cadres across organizations, I think that the least we can do is bring some empathy to their context and shift our own lenses. I think Mr. Gopal Krishnan said that in the earlier session as well. into the way that we view them and deal with them.
Very, very relevant and very practical. Mamta, what's your take on that, on the whole idea around the purpose, and from the background that you are coming from, what you think about it?
Very interesting. At the outset, thank you to the organizers for inviting me here. My shout out to Swati also, who thought it appropriate to invite me. Thank you very much. Thank you to Ajeya, who really took this forward. And we are missing you here, honestly. But the vibration is absolutely present here. So thank you for being there. My voice would be a little slurry. I just undergone a small operation. I had told Swati about it, but then I think if I'm understandable, I'm happily here. I'll give you another perspective about the whole thing. I belong to a Marwari family, and what I have seen is leadership in our families. We definitely see it at home. You know, our mothers and our grandmothers are solidly grounded and they are roaring at their homes, etc. They call the shots every time. But when it comes to workplaces, I have seen that somewhere or the other, especially for the women folk, if I may be allowed to say so, I come with the experience of about 32 years in corporate sector. I've worked in leadership positions. I wish to tell you that we have somewhat made ourselves a secondary citizen in corporates. We treat ourselves as being secondary. And unless we actually treat ourselves with respect, believe you me, nobody can give you respect. I have felt that we feel that office going is more of being engaged properly, of just not wasting our time, and that's it. So more or less, it's kind of a job of 9 to 5 or 6. We shut our computer, we shut our minds, and we're off. We don't want to get into any calls. If somebody calls us from office, we get irritated and we say, look, this is not the time when I can take calls, etc. So we may be committed, but we are not overly committed, and we don't own the product. We don't own the organization. At times, I have felt that it's more of kind of, when in office, we are plugged in, when out of the office, we are plugged out. Whereas I feel that in leadership position, it is more of an engagement. It's more of a commitment. Do you stop thinking about your son or your daughter or your house when you're always thinking about them, right? So I think if we can adopt the same strategy for our organizations, the purpose becomes more larger. The purpose gets integrated. I feel that integration is totally absent in the women folk especially. Up to the middle management or up to the lower management, this can still go on and we can still achieve. But when we think of opting to a senior management, this really has to change, Ajeya. I think you agree to this.
Thank you, Mamta, for bringing this very valuable perspective around purpose and leadership, and especially, you know, how do you see leadership from the senior role, because there are various layers of leadership in the organization. And I think I will come to the next question to Roopa's, and in fact, one of the chapters she has very beautifully highlighted this thing, and I really liked what she has written, that, you know, one very important anecdote she has highlighted, that from the board chair of CRISIL telling her that moving into senior management role is mainly about flipping your lens from a worm's eye view to a bird's eye view. So essentially to look at the things from various larger perspective, be more collaborative, not just within your organization, outside your organization. And I think this is one area where a lot of people actually struggle. You know, they are somewhat, whether it's it doesn't matter, woman employee or men employee, but somewhere at the middle level, they get stuck. So after the initial stupendous rise in their organization, there is some sort of, inertia that takes over. So Roopa, I mean, what are the skills and capabilities basically the middle managers actually require to transition into a senior management role, and what it takes to assume a broader responsibility in today's complex and diverse organizations?
Right. This is the biggest conundrum that people in the workforce face today. You know, so very often when I meet people who have spent anywhere between 8 to 15, 16 years in an organization, I hear the same refrain. You know, I've done really well in my career so far. I know my domain extremely well. I know my customer well. I manage my little team very well. I have a good equation with my manager or my boss. Why am I not able to make the transition or move from this level to senior management levels? And in reality, it's not just because there are fewer roles at the top. Of course they are. But the transition from mid-management to senior management is probably one of the most difficult transitions for people to make or professionals to make. And this happens mainly because of two reasons. The first is what you called out, Ajay, which is, you know, as long as you're up to middle management, your entire world is basically, you see the world from the perspective of you, your team, your customer, etc. But the moment you go to top leadership, it is almost like you have to flip the lens from bottom up to top down and get a bird's eye view. Think about what a bird's eye view does. It gives you a view of the entire landscape. You can see the big picture. You can see the interconnections. You can see what happens if you do something in one part, how it affects the other. You can anticipate problems coming. All of that you can do with a bird's eye view. And that whole bird's eye view is what I have used to characterize developing strategic capability. And I think that comes from listening. It comes from opening up yourself up to different experiences. It comes with a whole lot of things which I've outlined in the book, through stories, examples, and the like. The second big thing that happens in the move from mid to senior management or top management is the following. Look, as long as you're up to a certain level, your entire world is you, your team, your customer maybe, and your manager, right? That is your world. But as you go to the top, all of a sudden, you find a whole lot of new stakeholders coming out and coming at you. And many of them, or most of them, you may not have even dealt with before. And who are these people that I'm talking about? They could be regulators, they could be your competitors, they could be industry associations, it could be the media, investors, proxy advisory firms. You are having to deal with a bunch of people that you have never, your own board, you are having to deal with a bunch of stakeholders you have never encountered before. And and each of them comes with their own lens, and each of them have their own interests, and each of them have their own set of expectations. How do you really figure out how to deal with each of them and yet bring it all together and navigate it so that you're able to move yourself forward as well as the organization forward? These are hard shifts to make, Ajay. These are hard shifts to make. And it requires an openness, it requires a willingness to communicate, to engage. It requires breadth. And that is why one of the strong arguments I make in the book is, which may seem very naive in the age of today, that everyone is talking about deep tech and everybody is talking about super specialization and deep expertise. Yes, you require that, but think about it. Every single important breakthrough that you have seen around in the last 15, 20 years has actually come from people not with the deep domain expertise, but who were able to connect the dots and bring ideas from other sectors and industries to find that breakthrough. Look at NVIDIA, for example. It was making chips for video games, right? And what did that require? It required you to do several sets of calculations in parallel so that the video images in the games would move smoothly, which was very different from typical computer chips, which did sequential processing and therefore were focused on increasing the speed of processing. NVIDIA saw that for training AI models, you needed these parallel calculations of similar similar nature. And therefore, it flipped, and therefore it has become the force behind AI. Look at Tesla. They brought software mindset and technology mindset to the automobile industry. Steve Jobs himself was not a technologist. He brought marketing, psychology, design, and tech together in a way which no one has brought. So, yes, I think it is important to have super specialization, deep technology to execute and scale up things. But I think that the great innovations, which we will all have to focus on now because we are living in an era of disruption, the great innovations will come from people who have breadth of perspective, who read a lot, look at different domains, are able to see what's happening, connect the dots, and combine ideas in innovative fashions. So I think these are the skill sets which are going to be important in leadership for tomorrow.
Thank you so much for highlighting that. And in fact, I remember a famous book written a few years back called The Range. It was written by a gentleman called David Epstein, not Jeffrey Epstein, but and then he in fact advocated the idea of how deep generalists actually thrive in the specialist world. So I've been very much touching upon some of these things you said. So Mamta, just coming to you, that you engage a lot with the senior management and the boards. How do they see the whole capabilities of the CEOs and the CXOs today? Because they are all navigating through a very, very complex environment. There are geopolitical uncertainties, the regulatory challenges, and all sort of different organization issues. So if you can highlight maybe top 3 or 4 capabilities which are top of your mind, or how board evaluates the CXOs, that should be really very helpful.
Sure. I think a very interesting question. The first one that comes to my mind immediately is, of course, integrity and transparency. I tell you, this quality is something which is sought after and is a rare commodity. So when we see in boards that when a presentation comes over and somebody is making a point, believe you me, the board members are also smart enough to understand whether the papers have been really made with integrity, and is the top management being represented by the CFO and the CXOs are making their point validly, or it's kind of a circumvening it around. So it's very important that to win the trust and confidence of the board, who are ultimately going to say a yes or a no, and going to delve deep into the subject, it's very important that the papers are made very neatly and the points are candidly put forward in front of the board meeting. Of course, when the points are put forward, they need to also be palatably put forward. That goes without saying. The second quality which I must say is the art of navigating communication and correspondences. You make a big error, for example, when you make a document or you talk about it. I'll just give you a small example. Choro, comma, mat maro. Choro, comma, mat maro. And let me just shift the comma. Choro mat, comma, maro. So with a small shift of an insignificant comma, I have actually topsy-turvied the entire sentence and the meaning of it. So therefore, I say that the communication, the correspondences, the talking front, it makes a lot of difference. And the CXOs and the CFOs and even the company secretaries for that matter really should be very well trained as to how you are communicating with the board. And even the body language plays a lot of role. Though body language is something which we don't talk about much, but I feel when the presentation is made, it's very, very important that you show the confidence in your own home. We don't show confidence in our own documentation. When some question, though uncomfortable, comes up, we start looking at the MD's face, or we start looking at the CFO's face, etc. Then that means that you yourself are not prepared and you're not confident, you don't own the documents. So the second quality is please own the documents, please own the information, own the papers. What weakness that I have seen is we work on it at the last moment. So that's one weakness that I want to point out, that whenever we are on that position, I think deep diving is very important. We should not just hush and prepare or make any documents. At that level, the weakness that I've formally seen is that we feel that our junior is good enough to do it, and I'll just wade it through in the meeting. I think that's not the way of doing it. And the third point that you wanted to talk about and I wanted to say is own your team. We just don't, when we do a meeting, etc., we think that Ami Akai Aksho. I am the one who's the person and just can do anything that I want. My team is quite insignificant. Our earlier Gurucharan Das sir and sir was also talking that you really need to own your team. You really need to keep them at a high pedestal, and you can scold them otherwise, but in front of the entire lot, we should not just go head on with the team, because then you disconnect forever. So these are few soft qualities. There are so much more, but I think I'll rest my case here for the moment.
I think it's a very, very important point, this whole ownership aspect you talked about. And I'm sure at that level, there is, not much luxury to make mistakes, especially in the environment the CXOs are operating today.
And if you do make a mistake, because to err is human, I think we should have the courage and just come forward and say, oh, this has been an error. Just give me some time, I'll come back with the right documentation. But we don't do that, actually.
Great. So, we are pretty much at the end of the session, and, we are pretty late here as well. So, Roopa, just to summarize, you talked about your leadership manifesto, right? If you just highlight that, what are your leadership manifestos, and how do you see that today's generation of leaders can really, adopt some of those points that you have highlighted here?
Right. So I'll keep it brief. I know it's late. I'm standing between everyone and dinner. And there is a manifesto which is much more detailed than what I'm saying here. But if you were to ask me what my biggest leadership learning has been over the years, and it is about understanding that leadership doesn't mean that you have to have all the answers. Leadership is actually about knowing how to ask the right questions and creating the space for other people to shine. I think it's a journey. It comes over time. And in the context of modern leadership, we have to understand that the world has changed, and so has leadership. No longer are we in a command and control era. No longer are we, when I started working way back in the mid-1980s, I will just paint a picture, of what the workspace looked like. We rarely, if ever, saw our CEO. Sometimes we would see him near the elevator, and it was typically a him. Nobody spoke to young joinees or young employees about what the strategy of the company was. There were no town halls. Your promotions or increments got communicated to you with a letter which landed up on your table. If you wanted to communicate with someone outside your city, you walked up to a room where there was a person called a telex operator, and you dictated your message and he typed it across and sent it. You needed permission, and I was in a public sector unit at that organization, IDBI, at that point in time, and we needed permission from our manager to make an outstation call because they were so expensive, right? And so contrast that with a CEO and the leadership environment of today, where the CEO probably sits in an open office. You don't have to go through a secretary to access. You can directly send them an email. The workforce expects constant communication. They expect feedback. They see themselves as equal partners in the journey of the organization, not people who are going to be dictated to, but people whose opinions are sought, people whose views are taken into account. That is the expectation of the workforce. They are watching very closely to see, is the leadership people we can trust? Do they walk the talk? And I think leadership therefore has to reflect the changes in the workforce. They have to reflect the changes in society. We can't just dismiss by saying that, oh, they lack a sense of purpose, or they care about other things outside work. You are very focused. I think the leaders have to adapt more to this changing reality. And that, I would think, has been my biggest journey in learning. And I think it's been an arc from starting working with a public sector lender, visiting factory floors as a part of my day-to-day job in evaluating projects and being probably the only woman in the space at that point in time, to this whole, when India liberalized and opened up, moving to the open economy, where we were opened up to global competition and had to learn how to survive, bringing in new ideas into India. And the third decade, or the third stage of my career, which was in tech startups, which was really bringing the power of technology and innovation to democratize access to products and services for the bottom 60% of India's population. And I think that's really the arc that has been captured in this book. And that's really what the manifesto that I have laid out in the book reflects, Ajay.
Very interesting, very interesting. So are you working on any new idea for your next book?
I say one step at a time, and anyone who asks me this question, I tell them, look, the biggest motivation for an author is if people read their book and give feedback. So please first read my first book, tell me what you think about it, and maybe that will motivate me to think about writing my next one.
Sure, I think we will record this whole session, and once the viewers will see it, they would be inspired to read your books. So with this, I will close this session. Roopa Kudva, thank you so much for joining from Mumbai virtually, and I'm hoping your speedy recovery. Next time, we would like to have you here. And thank you, Mamta, for your very interesting perspective and complementing the whole discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Ajeya, for that riveting conversation, as well as Roopa Kudva and Mamta Binani. May I now request Anirban Chaudhary, Consulting Editor, TV9 Bangla, to kindly come on stage to felicitate Mamta Binani. Thank you very much, everyone. And with that, we have come to the end of day one, and it's time now for dinner. But before we do that, let's quickly tell you that this is just the day one, and there is a lot to come as far as day two of Business and Economy Literature Festival is concerned, with presenting sponsor EIILM, Curation Ideation Partner StoryNest, Knowledge Partner Penguin, Associate Sponsor Barmer Lorry, ChatGPT, Alliance Broadband, UEM, Priyo Gopal Bishnoi, Mukhoro Chok, Tata Structure, and DBS. Our partners, Policy Bazaar, our print partner, Barthaman, our writing partner, Parker, our media partner, Business Standard, and industry partner, BCCI. With that, it's the end of day one. We have a lot more lined up for you on day two. Hope to see you tomorrow.
Merry Christmas, Grandpa.
Macaroons. She used to love macaroons. How can I eat this without her?
Merry Christmas, Grandpa.
Parker, the right gift.
Thank you.
It's anti-proof.